Hi everyone, welcome to LeapScholar YouTube channel. Hope you're all doing good. We have a very special guest with us all the way from Canada who has mentored hundreds of students aspiring to go abroad for their higher education. Before we start off, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, subscribe now. With a lot of students having these questions in mind, we have Navjot with us today talking about everything you need to know about CRS Score. Before we begin, let me introduce Navjot. Navjot here is a storyteller with a knack for turning any amount of information into 5 decisive slides. A data nerd with over 13 years of experience in marketing insights, worked with companies like PepsiCo, BAT and Walmart across 18 markets. He's also a content creator focused on the success of immigrants in Canada, from getting a good job, building side hustles, investing in real estate and much, much more. Without any further ado, let's get right into it. So, Navjot, the first question is, what is CRS Score?
All right, so I'll try to answer it in short, but CRS stands for Comprehensive Ranking System. This is the way IRCC decides who to invite to Canada in the express entry process. So you have a few ways of coming to Canada. The fastest, it used to be the fastest, it's a little bit slow right now because of the pandemic and the backlogs, but the fastest way to come to Canada is through express entry. Now, express entry has CRS Comprehensive Ranking System. There are 4 broad parts of a CRS point system. Number 1 is your age. If you are under 30, you get the maximum points. The moment you cross that 30 mark, you lose 5 points per year. So a lot of people don't like turning 30 because they lose points then. So age is number 1. Then you have education. So if you have a doctorate, if you have masters, you get more points. If you have only bachelor's or your 12th pass, then you get less points. If you have Canadian work experience, Canadian education, you get 15 more points. If you have a Canadian master's, you get 30 more points. So education is the second, aspect of a CRS, point system. The third one is your IELTS, your language proficiency. So they want to understand how well you score in your IELTS exam. 8777 is generally what you need. The more you score, the better, your proficiency, your score will be. And the fourth one is your work experience. So if you have anything over 3 years of work experience, you score the maximum number of points. If you have 10 years of work experience, it doesn't matter. You will have the same amount of points that you will max out your work experience points, the moment you have 3 years of work experience. Now, there are certain nuances in a CRS score that actually can increase your points. I talked about education. If you have Canadian education, you get 15 more points. If you have Canadian work experience, you get about 50 to 60 points, depending on whether you have 1 year of Canadian work experience or 2 years of Canadian work experience. If you have a Canadian master's, you get 30 points, right? So CRS is actually made up, it's a 1200 point score. And for example, my score was about 464 with my spouse. And we could have scored a maximum of 471, but there are still 600 to 700 points to go that actually come with nominations, with, certain different things. If you have a sibling, a real sibling who is already in Canada, you get 15 more points. So there are certain things that you can actually do. And education is by far the most impactful, I would say.
All right. Well, the next question is how to improve CRS score.
My favorite way right now is education, because that you not only gain skills, right? So it's not just about getting a PR. It's also about gaining skills. So I always tell people, don't come to Canada with an intention of just getting a PR on study visa, right? So you also have to choose a course that could actually enhance your skills. So study visa is, I think, by far, I won't say the easiest. I won't even say the cost effective, right? Obviously, it's not cost effective because you actually spend money when you come here on education, but it's still one of the best ways of increasing your points, because you get 15 points more if you educate yourself in Canada, and then on top of that, when you gain experience, you get 50 to 60 points more. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, obviously, that's the most obvious, you increase your IELTS score. So 8777 is the minimum that you need, but you can always get 12 more points by scoring the maximum possible in all 4 sections. So that's another way. And obviously the third one, and that's the most difficult one in my view, is to get a offer letter from a Canadian employer, and you come here on work permit. You work here for a year on work permit, and then you apply through the Canadian experience class, or you get 50 to 60 points of Canadian work experience, and then you go ahead and apply, and you can. And obviously the fourth one is something that is actually gaining a lot of traction now is to go for provincial nominations. So what happens is, for example, in Ontario, Alberta, there are certain professions, there is a dearth of talent. So they give provincial nominations to people. For instance, they have a dearth of IT people, developers in Ontario. So they would actually invite developers to apply for something called as a provincial nomination. And once you are nominated, you get 600 points, and that's how you actually increase the score. But I think of all these, one thing that you have in your control and not on provinces or anything else is study.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that. Talking about scores, it's fair to ask, what is an ideal CRS score?
Look, so right now, like in general, I think 470, 475 was a good score to have. But because there have been no express entry draws in a while, I think a good score to have right now, and this is just based on not having draws for the last 1.5, 2 years, would be about 490, 500. And that's something that you can achieve if you have studied in Canada and if you have worked in Canada. So I think increasingly the amount of score that you will require, the CRS score that you will require, will move closer to 480 to 500. We are still to see in July there will be draws, and we'll know what Canadian IRCC is thinking from a scores point of view. But there's no ideal score here, to be honest, right now, because there have been no draws in the last 1.5 years. But I'll still say push it as close as possible to 500 to have a fair chance.
Okay. Well, the next question is, will having a low CRS score affect PR?
Yes, it will affect your chances of coming here on express entry, which is the fastest way of coming to Canada. But that doesn't limit you from doing things to improve your CRS. Like I said, you can go for provincial nominations. You can still come here on a 2-year study visa, get a 3-year work permit, and then have 15 points of studying in Canada and have 50 to 60 points of working in NOC 0A or B kind of a job here. So I think yes, having a low CRS will reduce or increase the amount of time it takes for you to get a PR. But that doesn't mean there are there are other ways of getting a PR in about 2 to 3 years if you are willing to spend a little on your education in Canada, or if you are in a job that can actually transfer you through an internal company transfer on work permit into Canada. So yes, lower CRS score will impact, but that doesn't mean that you still can't come to Canada.
All right. Well, the next question is, are couples scored differently than single applicants?
Absolutely. So, and we need to understand that from a Canadian point of view, right? So what Canadians want is for you to settle here and pay taxes. That's the whole reason why a lot of people say, oh, Canadians, are very open for, all this is happening because they want us to pay taxes, because they want young population, because there's an aging population in Canada. They want someone to pay taxes to fund the age-old population, and fund their social security. So if you are a couple, and it also depends on how educated you are as a couple, but if you're a couple and if you both have masters, or even if one of them has a bachelor's, you just get more points. And the point system is such, you can't say that you get 8 more points, 9 more points. It all depends on the education levels of both, in a couple. But yes, absolutely, you are scored differently, and there's a very high chance that you actually scored better as a couple. For instance, I'll give my example. If I was applying as a single applicant, I would have scored about 450. But because I was applying with my spouse, we scored 464.
Okay, that's amazing. And the last question is, can we calculate CRS score?
Absolutely. IRCC, there's a free tool available on IRCC's website. I highly recommend that, we put that in the description of this video. And you can actually there are a lot of calculators. One of the calculators we actually made, my wife, Simran, made a calculator. It's called Can Guide. There are other calculators also available on the App Store. But the best and the most, I would say, dependable way is to just go on IRCC website, answer a few questions. They are very similar to what we discussed in the beginning of this video, and you will get your scores for free. No one charges you for calculating the CRS score.
Thank you, Navjot, for this insightful session. And for users, we will soon be back with more such videos. Until then, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the comment section below. If you also want to know more about studying abroad, then click on the link below for a free counseling session.